Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Creating a Template webinar. My name is Nick, and I'll be doing the presentation for you today. Just like any of our other previous webinars, it will be muted, so you will not be able to talk. But if you do have any questions at any point throughout the presentation, please just go ahead and enter that into the questions area. And at the end of the class, I'll go through and answer any questions that have come up. Also, at the conclusion of the class, I will be sending out a PDF that will cover everything that we've talked about today. Like I mentioned, today's class is on creating a template. So by default, every new project you start is based on a template. A template determines what settings new projects will have, such as the unit of measure, building location settings. You can even include your building elements in a template, or a complete set of working drawing sheets with custom title blocks. You can create a template out of any drawing by simply saving it into your templates directory. To use the template in any new drawings, all you need to do is select it from the templates in your startup options. So the first thing we're going to talk about is creating a template. So to do this, unless you've already created your own template, we're going to go to File and we're going to select New. This will allow us to select a template. Once you've created a template, this is where it will be stored and you'll be able to see it and select it from here. If you're starting a new template, the best option here is to select one that's going to be closest to what you're going to be using, and then you can make the changes accordingly. For this demo, I'm just going to select the standard new home construction here, and I'm just going to say Create. This will start a brand new drawing, and at the bottom we're going to see a model, and we have 4 sheets available. One of the main things you want to make sure that you have set up in your template is your building locations. The building locations is one of the most important features or settings in the program because it's going to control how everything is stacked based on the locations you have added in. In this particular template, we're looking at a building location that has a foundation, a ground floor, and a second floor. If you're building in a zone where you're going to be building a slab on grade, then you're probably only going to need a foundation and a ground floor where your foundation would be the slab. Or if you're going to be doing a stem wall, then you can leave the foundation and add in your footings and stem walls accordingly. So you just adjust your wall heights and your floor levels to match those areas of need. Again, these are just starting off points. Again, you can control the heights of these areas as well. So under your floor levels, you can adjust the heights of your floors based on your region, your head heights, your ceiling heights, and your wall heights. Your head heights and ceiling heights are going to be depicted based on your design standards. Whatever the majority of your design is what I always recommend making sure that this is set at. And then anything that's going to be adjusted in the drawing can be done so on a need basis. So you can select a particular wall, opening, or ceiling and elevate those or adjust the height of those as needed. One of the other areas you're going to want to adjust on your template is going to be your framing options. So within Envisioneer, as long as you're using Building Essentials or Construction Suite, you're going to have 5 options in here. If you're using the Pro Architect option, you're only going to have 3 options. It's going to be a bearing wall option, an intersection lookup table, and an infill configuration. What this allows you to do is it allows you to specify what you want those configurations to be on each location. So in most cases, your ground floor is going to have a heavier or a beefier header construction if you're carrying a second floor story above. So this is why we have it set up into split locations so that you can control those header openings and on those particular locations. So again, go through here, specify what you want each of those framing options to be on each location, and then you can simply say OK. Once you've made your adjustments to your building locations, you can then say OK, and now that's actually saved to your drawing area. We also want to look at our program settings. So we're going to go up to Settings, and we're going to select Program Settings. And this is going to bring up the program settings for the actual program itself. So here you can set up your preferred program settings. When saved in a template, they'll activate with each new drawing, so you don't have to redo them every single time. Depending on what you want to show here, we can control the autosave feature. You want this to actually be on or off. You can control how you want your layout to look based on your toolbars. So you can have them on, tabbed, off, or normal. The workspace tab, this is going to allow you to control what's visible in your workspace. The commander is at the very bottom. That's where we see our grid snap, object snap, our Cartesian when we're working with those. Scroll bars you can have turned on or off. You can turn off your status bar, your view tabs, if you want to get rid of the tabs at the bottom, and the info panel, you can also turn that on or off, and then manufacturer logos as well. So if you want to show the actual manufacturer logo, it'll display over here. By default, these are the standard settings. Again, depending on how you want your workspace to be viewed every time you start a drawing, you can control that here. You can also control the colors. If you want to change the way the appearance of the colors are in your areas, you can use the workspace colors option to adjust the actual visibility of what you want to see here. Location dimming is a question we get quite frequently. This allows you to specify how dim the location above or below is going to be visible on the location you're working on. By default, it's set to 90%. So this will allow you to just see a faint silhouette of the location above or below. If you want to see it a little bit more clearly or a little bit brighter, then you can reduce the percentage so that way you can see it a little bit better. We also have visual aids in here, so you can show your coordinate icons. You can enable your screen tips and your model views, and you can enable your virtual keyboards. We have line work, which will only show up in your working drawing sheets. It's not going to show up in model, so you can have this turned on if you want to. In your print previews, you can show the contents of what you're actually going to see. We also have a worksheet view behavior. So these are going to control the text, how it's going to be printed in a vector format, enabling a paper shadow. Again, these are things that are just going to show how it's going to look when you're working on that sheet. The keyboard option allows you to customize your keyboard shortcuts. You can go through and specify what you want those to be. Drawing aids will allow you to control specific drawing routines or features. So how you're actually going to be clicking on elements, so a pick point or pick and drag control, a single click of elements will either insert it a single insertion or a repeat insertion. You can specify nudge distances. This is very handy if you're going to be moving things around. So for example, if you're adding in a cabinet, you can specify your normal distance to be 1 inch. So anytime you move the arrow key on your keyboard, it will move 1 inch. If you have the control key pressed down and you use the arrow key, it will then revert to a 1 foot nudge increment. So again, very handy feature if you're just looking to move things around with the arrow keys. And then we have the auto scroll feature. So if you're moving your mouse with something selected, the screen will automatically scroll for you. And we have a speed control where you can adjust how that's going to work. The building aids is going to allow you to control how things are actually added in and how they're visible on the screen. So we have a enforced material usages, which is just a dialog box that pops up to let you know of a warning if you're applying a material to an object that shouldn't have that material. We have opening placements, so you can dimension that to the edge or to the center. Dynamic dimensions, you can apply that to the outer surface or to the edge, or to the core. Our window opening symbols, we have a couple of different options here. Because we do ship worldwide, we do need to make sure that different regions have the ability to show things differently. In Australia, they do show things a little bit differently than we do here. So we have the actual hinge side that you can show where the arrow points is the hinge side, or where the arrow points is actually where the opening side is. So again, depends on what you want to show there, and you can adjust that. And the same with your door swing directions, again, just to cover all our bases in our different regions. The stretch openings feature allows you, if you have that selected, while in a 3D view, you can select a window or a door, and you can actually stretch it to meet a new size. And then with the auto name feature selected, it will automatically rename the opening based on the size that you've stretched it to. Graphics is an area where it's going to allow you to specify what graphics card is being used. So if you're having issues with your 3D navigation, then you want to come here and check to make sure that your video card is up to date and you can see what graphics card is actually being used. We also have a navigation control. So this will allow you to go through and adjust how you're navigating through the plan. So you can have continuous motion, or you can invert it, you can slow it down or speed it up. Down in the lower right-hand corner, you could have your navigator control turned on. I have mine disabled. You can turn that on or off as you need to as well. I'm just going to say cancel to that. We're going to go back to settings, and we're going to go up to document settings. So in here, you can control per document what you want this template to store. So based on your drawing aids, again, what do you want to be visible when you first open up your first drawing? Do you want the grid to be on? What color do you want those lines to be? What do you want your spacing to be? Again, that's going to be controlled per template in that drawing. And the same with your snap behaviors. You have your object snap, ortho, angle snap, grid snap, and your snap tracking. If you have ortho turned on, your angle snap will be turned off. If you have angle snap turned on, your ortho will be turned off. So you can only have one of those on at a time, or you can have them both turned off. So one or the other or both are turned off. If you have a snap angle, you can control what you want that snap angle distance to be, or the degree to be. By default, it's set to 15 degrees. Under our building aids, we have some more controls here. So we have enable collision control. This will not allow you to place objects inside of other objects. And then we have a select elements on current location only while in plan view. This is a feature that should be turned on a majority of the time. What this limits you from doing is selecting objects on other locations. So if I'm on the ground floor, I don't want to be selecting something on the foundation. So this locks that ability to select things below or above that location you're working on. In some cases, you may want this to be turned on or off, so you can simply uncheck this. And the only time you would ever really need to do this, if you want to move your entire plan or mirror your entire plan, you would uncheck this. That way you're selecting everything on every location, and you can mirror or move. And then I would recommend coming back in here and turning this back on. For any estimators out there that are using the Enable Solid Fill, this is where you can control turn that on or off. I always recommend keeping that off to start. That way you can see how your intersections are actually closing and making sure that they're connected properly. Once you're happy with the way it looks, then you can enable your autofill, which will show you the different colors, specifying your load-bearing walls from your non-load-bearing walls. We also have an automatic elements tool here, which is basically your automatic insert floors. So anytime a closed circuit of walls is added in, it will automatically insert a floor. And the floor that's going to be added in is going to be the first floor in the catalog, which is a hardwood floor. Majority of the time, I would recommend that this is turned off. Unless you're drawing just to show a quick room design, then you want to leave it on. If you're going to be adding in your own floors, showing a structural floor, then I would recommend turning this off and then adding in your floor manually. And then we have the insertion by room option. So we have our floor, ceilings, and room regions are all set to core. You can adjust these so that it goes to the surface if you want to as well. It's just how things are inserted. Units of measure, again, it's going to be a template-based feature here or control. So what do you want this to be set up as an imperial or as a metric? And then you can control your units and your precision of how you want that to be displayed. Site boundaries just allows you to, again, set up how you want your site boundaries to be displayed in your drawing area. I'm just going to move on to terrain. So I do get this question quite a bit as well. The terrain feature here will allow you to specify how your terrain is going to be cut. So by default, it's going to be cutting around the ground floor in this particular template. If you're going to be adding in a foundation, you may want to change that to be foundation. So that way it's always going to cut around the foundation walls instead of the ground floor walls. You can also control where the terrain mesh is going to be set. So it's at 0 inches right now, you can elevate that up or down. The actual size of the terrain is 160 feet by 160 feet by default. That's going to be that big green square that you see anytime you zoom out in your drawing area. That's what that is representing. Again, that's just one of our default settings. You can make that bigger or smaller depending on how you want that to be shown. The contours option, again, will be when you add in a slope tool, it will show you the actual contours of your actual sites. The material will allow you to control what you want your grass to look like. So we have a couple of different options there. By default, it's using grass 1. You can change that if you need to. Global will allow you to change the location in which you're building. So if you are going to be working in a specific area, you can change that on your global settings. Same with your 3D Real View settings. I would probably leave this as it is to start with. I always recommend rendering at a lower quality to start and then bumping that up as you see fit. This can actually be controlled under your 3D Real View settings as you're starting your render. So you don't actually need to come in here to make these changes. I'm going to skip over animations. Element mark settings. This is where you're going to be able to go in and adjust how your marks are going to be displayed in your drawing. So in here you can come through and specify how your door, window, opening marks, members, cabinets, walls, and anything else would be considered a default. So again, we have these set up for you by default to start with. You can come in here and make adjustments to suit your design needs. I'm just going to skip right down to the dimension auto exterior. And this is a handy feature because anytime you want to take advantage of the auto exterior dimension tool, it's going to take into consideration these settings. So you want to make sure that this is set up before you start. So by default, it's going to be using the overall projections in your openings. You can also include your interior walls on your exterior strings if you want to. And then if you're going to be drawing with angled walls, you'll want to have the angled walls option turned on. Again, by default, we have angled and interior walls turned off. The next line is your dimension line distances. This is going to control how the dimension lines are being spaced from your actual model. So again, make that change now, so that way anytime you start your drawing and you add in your dimensions, they're set up automatically. The extension lines, again, 2 different styles, again, for 2 different types of regions. A lot of people in Australia will be using this option here where it's cut off at the highest point of the model, which is all in line. We typically drill right to the corners. Again, it's a preference. Same with the openings. We have the center on opening, or you have the edges of the openings. We can also add in a separator. So if you actually want to add the height of the window in there as well, or the opening in there as well, you can do that. So if it's a window that's 3 foot by 3 foot, you can add that in so it shows 3 foot, and then you'd have a slash 3 foot, or you would have a dash 3 foot, times 3 foot, or a multi-line, so it'd be 3 foot over 3 foot. Again, if you have the add opening height, that's where the separator comes into play. The end condition is actually what you're going to be dimensioning to. So again, you can add the surface, core, exterior, core center, core interior, or surface interior. If you happen to have interior walls selected, then the interior walls option will open up and you can actually specify where on your exterior dimensions do you want your interior walls to be dimensioned to. Again, you can go to your leading surfaces or trailing surfaces, leading or trailing core, or the center of the core. Your auto interior dimensions, again, allows you to control how you want your interior dimensions to be displayed when you're adding in your auto interior dimensions. So by default, it's going to be going to the leading and trailing edge of the surface. And then you can control that even further if you want to actually show another option, or you want to show just the core, then you would turn off these options and show just the core. I'm going to turn the edges back on. And then we have this ignore walls dimensions option. And what this will do is, instead of actually showing the distance from here to here and say it's 4.5 inches or 6.5 inches, and you're going to have that 6.5 inches right inside the wall, you can say ignore your wall dimensions. I will call that up later at a different time on a different part of the drawing as a typical dimension, so I don't need to show it. If you don't check that, then anytime you draw a line through your model, every single interior wall you cross through will show that dimension. So again, that's a preference on how you want that to be displayed. Once we're done there, we're just going to say apply and then OK. The other thing you want to work on is your working drawing sheets. So if I go to a worksheet, I have my title blocks by default that show up with the CADSoft Envisioneer or the CADSoft logo and the information that's going to be applied to that. Some of the information is actually going to be taken from the project manager. So I would leave this as it is for right now, because it's just going to pull in your project name, your client name, the address, and the city. And that's what we're seeing down here. So we have client name, project name, address, and city. So whenever you start a new drawing, you want to go to your project manager, fill out that information, and then your title block will adopt that information. Some of the other things you do want to change, though, is going to be your title block logo. So instead of using the CADSoft logo and the CADSoft name, we can go in and specify a different logo. So all I would do here is I would say edit definition. I would select that title block, and it's bringing up an actual image, and I would just replace it with the image of my company. Make that change, and then I can go in and just say escape to get out of the definition, and then I can select this option, select the title block again, and if I go back into the definition, I can select the actual wording here and make adjustments to that. So if I just say, for an example here, let's just double click on that and we'll say Bob. We'll just say Bob, and then we'll say OK. So it'll change there. And if I adjust this to use a different image, and if I just go to, just trying to think if I have a picture somewhere. And let's just say we want to use that as our image, and I'll say OK. I can select it and shrink it down. So this is going to be my new logo. And I'm just going to say properties. I'll say 8 feet by 2 feet. Okay, so that's my new logo, and I'm going to place that there. When I exit out of the definition, I've made that change on that first sheet, but it's also going to change it on every other subsequent sheet as well. So that's made that change for me in this template. So when I go and I say back to here, I'm going to go File. I'm going to say Save As. And I don't want to save this in the project folder. I want to save this right to the templates folder. So I'm going to go in and say Save In, use the drop down, and then under the C drive, under Program Data, under CADSoft, under Envisioneer 14, I have templates. And in here, I'm going to give it a name. We changed the naming convention in version 14 because we did add a couple of new new templates in here. And it was the old format of 1 to 9. The problem with that sequence was as soon as you got to the double digits, it went back to 11 would show up first. So it was overriding where our number 1 priority was. So we went to a lettering system. So if you want yours to show up first in the list, then you can give it a different name so that it shows up first. So you can do 1 and then say Bob. You could also save this with some options in here. So if I want to actually show an image, I can show it with this actual image file. So it'll show up with a specific image based on what I want that to look like. I can adjust the notes in here so that I know exactly what I'm working with when I'm selecting this template. I'm just going to leave that as is, and let's say OK. And then we'll say Save. And now when I go to start a new drawing, I can go, and I'm just going to go File and close this one. I'm going to go File, New. Now when I start a new drawing, and my template is going to be available to use, and since I put the number 1 ahead of it, it's going to be the first one in the list. So that takes care of creating a template in Envisioneer. I do see that there are some questions already showing up, so I will go through and answer any of those questions. If you do have questions, please feel free to go ahead and enter those in, and I'll do my best to answer those for you. One question is, does a larger site require more memory than a smaller site? I believe you're referring to the terrain size. That question is a little tricky. If it's just going to be a 300-foot by 300-foot square, then no, it won't be that much more memory needed. However, if you are adding in spot points and your site is bigger, then yes, it will take up a little bit more memory because it's got to go through and analyze that model and all of the contours. If it's just a flat site, then no, it's not going to be that much of a difference. It's only when you start changing it into your 3D model and you start adding in contours and slopes that yes, the bigger the site size, the more it's going to take. It will also increase the file size as well. So again, I'll leave that question section open, so please feel free to go ahead and enter any questions in that you have. If you can't think of a question now and one pops up later on, please feel free to go ahead and contact our support department. They'll be able to help you out with any questions you have as well. And I'm just going to go through and show you that the settings that we added in are actually saved. So we are using that one Bob template. So when I go over to my worksheet views, we can now see that it's still using that information. And when I go into my project manager, I'm going to say Nick's house is the project name. The client is Nick. The address is 123 Fake Street, and the city is Guelph. When I say OK to that, we can now see that these have actually changed. So the project name is now using that information. The client is Nick, and that is using the project name and the street. And that will carry across to each of my working drawing sheets. So the question is, can you go over the different scales used on the various tabs and how to set up the paper size? So by default, we're working at a 1/4 inch scale. So in model view, we're drawing at a 1/4 inch scale. Our worksheets are also a 1/4 inch scale. So if I just right click and say view properties, I have this sheet set to be a 1/4 inch. So if I wanted to, I can adjust this sheet to be a different size. So that way when I insert an elevation or something along those lines, it's using a different scale. I don't typically change the scale of the sheets. I usually leave those as a 1/4 inch. I use the proper sheet size, so I'm using if I'm going to be printing this out as a 24 by 36 size title block, that's the title block I add in, but I'll adjust the import of the Smart View. So when I go to insert a Smart View of something, if I have something drawn in here, this is where I would adjust the actual scale. So I would say I want this to be 1/8 of an inch, and then I would insert it as a drawing, and it's going to insert that at 1/8 of an inch, as opposed to inserting it as a 1/4 inch, and you can see that it's bigger. The difference is it's just going to show the size as you're importing it. Again, for me, my preference is leave the sheet sizes as they are and then change the size of the scale of the elements or the Smart View that you're bringing in. The paper sizes, again, I'm using the 24 by 36. If I want to change that, then what I can do is I can go into my blocks and say insert block, and then under my block names, I have the different title blocks that I can bring in. And again, these are going to be still using the CADSoft title block sizes, the CADSoft logo is going to be in these. So if the template that you're going to be creating needs to use an 11 by 17 or 18 by 24, then make sure you insert that into your sheet area first, give it the proper naming convention, add that in, and then we'll just take this, delete this out, delete this out, delete this out, and now this sheet is going to be using that title block that I believe I inserted was an 11 by 17. So now I will go through and make the same changes that I did before, adjusting the logo, adjusting the company information, and then save this as my template. And now this template is going to be 11 by 17. The sheet sizes are still going to be a 1/4 inch scale, though, unless you want to change that to be 1/8 of an inch. But again, my suggestion is leave it as a 1/4 inch. It's the same that is in model, just change your smart view as you're importing it. The next question is how do you alter the drawn by, checked by info? That is actually done in the actual drawing. So if I just double click on that, if I click on that and I say edit definition, and I say edit, I can actually go in here and edit this to say NEC, that's my initials. And I can say okay to that, and then I would change that all the way down. And now it will be changed on each drawing sheet as well. So you can make those adjustments as you need to, but it's a part of the actual definition of the title block itself. So just like when we were adjusting the company information to show that, let's just go to this title block here. This is one that we've actually adjusted here. So again, select that, edit definition, double click, NEC, say OK, hit escape to exit the definition. And now the other 3 sheets will also have that NEC change as well. Again, it's going to be a part of the definition. So my title block changes were applied to all working sheets except for one floor plan first sheet. So if that's the case, then that tells me that you adjusted the title block to be something different. So as you can see, when I made the adjustment to this title block and I made that NEC, and let's just show you what I mean here. This is a totally different title block. You can see it says title block 11 by 17. It's only going to make the adjustments to any title block that is using that same naming. So right now, if I make that change and I hit escape and I go to elevations and details and site plan, none of those are changed because it's a different title block. As you can see, this one is using title block 24 by 36. So if the change didn't take on the first one, then that means that you've inserted a different title block on that first page, or you've exploded it or something along those lines. It's just made it different than the other ones. Just one other quick note too when you're working with these is I always try to make sure that once I've made an adjustment on a worksheet like this, I use the zoom tool just to zoom it back to full. And I do that all the way through. It's just a cleaner way of going about it. So that way, when you go to insert your actual floor plan onto that sheet, it's just a matter of inserting it. You're not having to worry about zooming in or out. And the same with model. I always try to make sure that I'm zoomed in so I'm seeing just inside the green square. Some people like seeing the entire green square. So all you have to do is just click the zoom to fit. Then you can see the drawing area that you're going to be working with. And when you start drawing, you're making sure that you're drawing in the center of that green area. Again, you can use the zoom tool to zoom in and out just to get that to as close as you want, and then save that as your template. And then anytime you start a new drawing, you know you're always working in the middle of your model. And anytime you go to your working drawing sheets, they're always fully zoomed out so that you're inserting right into the center of your title blocks as well. So I'll leave the questions section open for a little bit longer. Again, like I mentioned at the beginning of the class, I will be sending out a PDF that covers everything that we talked about today. That way you have some documentation to refer back to if you get stuck trying to do this on your own. If you are trying to do this on your own and you do get stuck and the documentation isn't helping you, you can contact our support department as well, and they'll be able to give you a hand in getting your template set up. I'm glad that worked for you. So that question was just in regards to the title block not updating on the first sheet. That fixed his problem. So I'm glad that worked for you. All right, well, that looks like that's all the questions. So again, I want to thank everybody for attending today. And again, I look forward to speaking with you all again very soon. Have a great day, everyone.